Okay, we have 25 minutes here, so I'm going to talk about the second piece. Part of what Peter was kind of touching on too, and the reason why we wanted to do this, we're constantly learning about this, and I think one of the things that we're thinking about is how to drive change at Stellar, and we wanted to shed some light on this, and kind of talk a little bit about it, because I think it is helpful for all of us, and it's something that matters to us, and it's something that we realize that maybe we haven't been as clear about, and it's kind of just worth digging into a little bit more. And so maybe I'll start by saying we value bottom-up problem solving, right? Like we want people on the team to own problems on our engineering team. When that happens and everyone rows in the same direction, we move pretty fast, right? Like it's really the analogy of these boats for me is really how I look at this team, right? Like if we all row in the same direction, it's going to move very fast. And we want individuals to shape the organization. And so this presentation is a little bit about this. And I also want to thank everybody that gave me feedback on it. I passed this along a good amount of time, and I want to thank everyone that contributed to it. Alex, Alice, Benedict, Diane, Jing, Matt, Pat, Peter, proofreading and offering feedback to it, and really, really appreciate it. There are already examples of people in forums that this happens in. And Tech Leads Group is one of them. We created this specifically to enable individual contributors to drive cross-team problem solving. Alice and Matt, I'm not going to list everybody, but these are like things that already happen in this forum. You can see the ongoing roadmap for it. And these are people that have driven this kind of change out of this forum. The director meeting and eng managers groups are also a forum where we drive change from more of the process level. Lee and Peter drove a bunch of it. Pat and Norman are working on sprint planning. Engineering onboarding has been driven part of this. New hire expectations have been driven a part of it. The hiring committee, this is currently owned entirely at the kind of IC level, almost. Peter owns the overall thing, but a lot of people contributed with take-home test rubric changes, question reviews, how to write rubrics. A lot of the decision-making in this forum are made from people on that forum and not top down. A lot of things in engineering already have been driven by ICs. Our front-end build tool chain, our React versus Vue choice, drinks and demos run by Crystal Lee. Diane has done a bunch of bug duty improvements. A lot of, TRE owned our entire ETL pipeline V2 architecture. So you could own something here too. But what I want to talk about next is kind of what happens when you don't feel like you can do that, and what happens in reality sometimes. Those were kind of, in my mind, success stories and things that we absolutely see on the team, but we've also heard friction here. And what generally happens when you experience friction here is, I think, and this is my story of how I think the experience is for each and every one of you that feels this, you kind of see the problem, you raise it, and then some people agree, some people don't. You feel like you're right, and then eng leadership somewhat stalls. You don't really understand why. You kind of feel blocked. There's concerns being raised, and then you kind of decide that we're slow and bureaucratic, and you give up and you get disappointed. And so that's some experience that some people have. I know that for sure. And so why does this happen? I think that there's three things that I see that I need to do better at communicating at, and maybe this presentation is a start to this. One, I think there's many problems that we need to solve with different event horizons, right? So a lot of the, we can't solve everything now, and different things have different, there's some problems that we have today, there's some problems that we're gonna have 2 quarters from now, there's some problems that we're gonna have a year from now. And they're just different, right? Like these event horizons are different, and there are many problems to have, right? Like they just exist all around us. 2, we are opinionated as an eng culture. I think we tend to think that there are objectively right answers, and I think this also, we're not always doing the best at articulating what is our opinion, what that we should take an opinion, not necessarily that this is the opinion, but kind of try to find that opinion. And then 3, we believe in focus, right? And so we do believe that we can only solve so many things at once, and we can't solve everything at once. And so, especially if you combine that with number 1, where there are many problems around, If you see a problem that maybe is not on the list to solve or not something that focus on, and you kind of pick that and be like, this really burns. Why are we not solving that? Sometimes the number 3 will be the answer of we chose to solve these other few problems, not this one right now. And that also causes some confusion. And so I'm going to touch briefly on each of these. One, how to identify problems. A good rule of thumb here is kind of problems that you feel that you experience are generally a good starting point of problems that everyone else has. Now, our tests are slow. Our whatever on-call rotation is not that great. Our testing coverage is not that good. Our we start having all these mono repos or all these small repos, and I don't know where to find the code. I don't know. There's all sorts of examples from your day-to-day life that I think Krista Lee at some point brought up that candidates have a hard time interviewing in Google Docs and they kind of hate it. And even some of you said that maybe that's a problem to have. There's many of them. It's important here to point out that there is a difference between pet peeves and something that's important to address. And this does come with some practice. It shouldn't stop you from raising these and testing them. But I would also, that's something that's common in startups in general. People kind of think that they have all sorts of problems to solve. It's common here too. And I would say this is, I personally cultivate a general feeling of unhappiness at all times with technology. I hate my phone. I hate my computer. I hate spreadsheets. I don't hate them, but I'm constantly annoyed by my TV. I'm constantly annoyed. It's just hard to use. And so being in touch with feeling a bit annoyed at these things will help you identify these. Is not the worst thing to do, but keep an open mind that you're indeed ultimately they are kind of easy to use. They're not that complicated, and so good guidance here. What type of problem is this, right? Is it a productivity problem? Does it affect consumers? Is it about dev kind of how fast we move? Is it about how flaky the platform is? How common is this problem? And what's the impact of it, et cetera? And here with problem identification is also worth pointing that there are different costs as well, right? Some problems are recurring, right? And that does cost us over time. Slow tests cost every one of us. If it's something is a problem right now in one area and it doesn't really, I don't know, some database issue or something that we fix and then it's fine, then that's just one time and one cost versus this recurring cost. And this cost benefit will be a little bit, it's complicated to judge, not as trivial all the time. What makes good solutions now on the other side? Documentation helps with decision making. So this is, ultimately a good solution that we prefer are solutions with low downside and high upside, right? So if the risk is low and you can show that you understand that the risk is low and convince other people the risk is low, then people will be like, yeah, sure, do it. Nothing's going to happen if you do this. Versus if the risk is high and it's like, yeah, I could do this, but then there's real risks in here, then we're gonna, you're probably gonna meet resistance. Incremental change is much easier to execute than wholesale change. And general controversial solutions will always have a harder time being pushed through than non-controversial solutions, obviously. We have some pretty good documentation on both written documentation by Peter, and again, I'll point people at TDD best practices to help with some of these documentation best practices. I will say that done right, documentation can really help speed things through, and it's not a bureaucratic, you can interpret it as a bureaucratic process and start over documenting things and think that you're asked to put some docs together because it's just leadership wants to. But that's not really the goal. You can write very short docs that get the point across, communicate that you understand what's happening, and collect concerns so that you can address them and document that quickly and move pretty quickly on this. And I've seen this done well a bunch of times, and it really doesn't take a lot of time. And it's used to just be able to communicate things well, that being the goal, communicate things well, rather than some fancy bureaucracy. And then third, focus matters, right? It feels like this, right? This is fine, dog. That's what it feels like, I'm sure. It feels like that to me. things are just broken all the time. It's just like, this is broken, this is broken, and this is broken. You kind of have to live in that fire a little bit and be comfortable with it and be like, yeah, this is fine. Because it is more productive to focus on a few problems than try to solve everything at once. If you try to solve everything at once, you're not going to be able to do a good job at any of them. And not solving everything at once has this side effect of, yeah, there's going to be some problems around that we choose not to solve, and it sucks. And I'm sorry. And I'm going to have to put up with it, and you're going to have to put up with it. The second piece that's worth talking about is that there is a dance in between the problem owner, the person that's trying to drive the change, and the person that has the authority to say no, right? And this is Eng leadership or other people. No, Eng leadership for cross Eng team stuff. If you're an individual contributor on your squad, you might, your Eng manager is going to be the authority there that will stop you from making some changes to your sprint process or whatever else you try to do, rotations on your team, etc. Now, and so this person with authority can be at all levels, depends on what kind of change you're trying to drive and the scope of that change. And so there's really kind of two sides to this in between these two people that make something either feel really good and easy and go through very easily, or can make things just feel sluggish and you feel blocked and doesn't feel good. And I think the top here is more about the problem, and the second bottom half is more about kind of the people involved. Now, on the problem, if it's clear that the ROI is high, the solution is downside risk, and now is largely the time to solve the problem, you're probably going to get green light pretty quickly on this if you're aligned on those. Generally, when you feel blocked, it is probably a misalignment of cost benefits and ROI. The person trying to drive the change thinks the ROI is higher than the person blocking the change, and they're just not aligned on that. There's something going on there about how important is this of a problem? How much is the solution solve it? Is this the right thing to do? And is it now the right thing to do? And is this going to be, give us good ROI? Same on the solution with high downside risk. I've definitely seen solutions that people proposed, and I don't think I personally was aligned with that person on the downside risk of that. And like, I don't know, I'm not sure. I think there's some risks in here. And if that person was like, no, I don't think there's risks, and then we miscommunicated around that. And then it felt like a blocker, right? Because if the person with authority sees like bigger downside risks than the person trying to propose the problem, then they're gonna probably try to defend against that a little bit, right? Like you don't want to let that go through if there's like really big risks involved. And also if the time is not now, right? Like, yeah, we should fix this, and there's like a million things, I don't know, move to AWS. Yes, we should move to AWS, but like now, I don't know, like it might be, the next year, sure. 3 years from now, no doubt we're not going to be on, most 99% we're not going to be inaptable. Do we need to move all to AWS to, this quarter? Probably not, right? And so that time horizon matters as well. And kind of that's what, we're getting with the incremental change as well. And that sometimes misalignment of that also doesn't help. And then similar on the kind of person and the approach here, right? Like if you focus on incremental progress, if you show good listening skills, if you're willing to incorporate other perspectives and listen, then it's going to be much easier to push change through, right? Because now you're like, okay, this person listens to feedback, understands concerns, doesn't necessarily need to agree with them all the time, but at least hear them, adjust their approach on them, and kind of show that listening. On the flip side, if the person doesn't showcase these things, the person owning either tries to go too far too quickly, or maybe thinks that everybody else is wrong. Like, yeah, I hear the concerns, but they're not a real concern, and kind of dismissive of other people's concerns, doesn't really adjust their approach based on feedback. That also will make the person with authority feel nervous, because all of a sudden you have somebody that doesn't quite listen, doesn't quite, hear what you're saying, and it's nothing as bad as not feeling heard on both sides, right? Same on your side. If the person with authority doesn't hear what you're trying to see and like the problem you're seeing, you're going to feel really bad. It goes both ways. Goes both ways. And I think there is a last bullet point about the person owning it, and this is requires some self-awareness, right? Like if we ask a backend data engineer to give us React best practices, it's just not going to work as much as you want to, and you're willing to, and you listen. Like at some point, I mean, that's a pretty obvious mismatch, but there could be mismatches like that of like, yeah, this was just not the right you're not the right person to solve that problem. Hopefully that should be pretty rare. Next few sections are kind of tips and tricks for both sides. And so on the authority side, what we want to do more of, what I want to do more of, all of us should, that are in positions of authority should do more of, is listen more. And so find what we can say yes to, appreciate intent and effort. All of us want to do good stuff. And I think every single person on this team wants to do well for this team. And so do we, the people with authority. And so just meeting in the middle and say, and appreciating that intent and effort is really important. Finding the things that we can say yes to is important. Explaining what we need to move forward to. I think this is something that sometimes I know I'm guilty of. I express concerns very easily. I don't always express what would take to move forward. I can say, hey, I'm kind of concerned about this. I don't know about this compliance. I don't know about this PHI thing. I think this is a risk. Very easy for me to see those. And I recognize that as a person, I tend to have much easier time seeing that and expressing that quickly. I need to put in the work myself and to show, to kind of explain what is needed to move forward, because just expressing concerns leaves you in a very kind of weird place. What do I do now? I don't know what to do. And articulating what's important and not important, similarly, kind of important on this person. And I think this is where the people with authority have two responsibilities that are really kind of at odds at times. Both serve and help the people that try to drive change, and be there to help them, because ultimately you're doing the work. If you're trying to drive that change, you're doing a lot more of the work than the person with authority. On the flip side, also making sure that everybody rows in the same direction is their responsibility. If we just kind of let people do whatever they want, I think none of us will be happy, because people will just row in different directions. And then we're just going to create more problems than we have. And that's kind of their job to also try to kind of keep people in the same direction. And these two sometimes are at odds. Now, on the tips, on the problem owner tips and tricks, identifying stakeholders is pretty important. Who has the power to say no to this? Who is affected by this? And showing that, listening to those people, understanding what matters to them, and then showcasing ownership end to end well will take you a very long way, right? Like commitment to own this fully and responsibly. Just ultimately, maybe this entire slide should be just talk to people. Like just go and talk to people, ask them questions, see what their concerns are, and do that a bunch of times. And then you're going to learn a lot by doing that. And even if you feel like the person says no to you and be like, I'm concerned about this, just go talk to them. You're like, hey, I kind of see you're doing that. Why is that? Can you tell me a bit more about it? Can you kind of like just pull it out of them? Because you might learn what stands behind it pretty quickly. Documentation, we already kind of went through this. Pretty important to document, especially at our scale, especially in a remote culture, right? Very hard to drive change if you're like, yeah, just know that this is going to be a thing. I'm like, I don't know, do you? Like, I'm not sure. And I also want to show this to a few other people that want to validate this thing. What do I show them, right? And so writing things should not be long or costly. We've already covered this well, so I'm not going to go too deep in here. There's decent documentation for us now about this. This is on feedback in general, and so there's the distribution of solutions in general is on the left side. Most things have a pretty objective distribution. There's stuff that's junk, there's stuff that's okay, there's a decent amount of pretty okay stuff, there's a good stuff, and then awesome stuff, right? Like that should be an idealized distribution, even for solutions. There's two kinds of reactions that you're going to get from people. Either very positive reactions and encouraging, like people will kind of say this is awesome, it's a good start, really good, and that you can kind of see how it maps. I mean, it's exaggerated here, but I've mapped it to the objective distribution of things. And then you also see the other side of I'm concerned about this, I'm not sure, I'm risks, I don't know, and then all the way to the other end is like, oh, awesome, it's only skewed to that side. Maybe I'll say that in a healthy organization, both of these types of reactions should be if you get good at identifying them and being able to work with both, then they will both have valuable feedback for you, because they would just be translation issues and not actual like commentary on your solution. And so being able to deal with both kind of feedback will help you deal with more people, not just the ones that are in one bucket or the ones that are in the other bucket. And then on solutions themselves, incremental progress, super helpful. Minimize downside risk, super helpful. You know, kind of show that you're open to hearing people's concerns and feedback, whatever bucket it falls into, and then incorporating that into your solution, I think would be, is ultimately will take you a long way. And I think that's it. And I finished with 3 minutes to go. And so let's see if anybody has any questions. Was this helpful? Not that helpful?
So I have a question, comment. So I guess I've also kind of asked this question before, and as you mentioned, I've thought about how to affect change here, and sometimes it leaves me a little unclear on concrete next steps. Like some of it's just about communication, and I guess your point is that it's communication agnostic, that it doesn't matter if I send an email or open a Slack thread. Is that my interpretation correct?
Sorry, what are you trying to ask the question about?
My question is about if I want to kick off this opinion gathering and process here, how should I go about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there's probably a couple of things. I'd first identify your stakeholders, right? Like what are you trying to do, and who's that going to affect, and who can say yes or no to that? And then I'd go talk to that person and say, hey, who do I need to move this forward? And then once you identify those people, then I probably talk to them first and say, hey, is this the right time to solve this problem? Is this a real problem? Do I kind of have the right idea of the solution, right? Like you can socialize that pretty quickly, right? Like once you identify. And so, I mean, let's take a concrete example. Let's say you want to move us from Google Docs to CoderPad in our interview process. Peter is currently running the hiring committee. So he's probably going to be the one that's going to say yes or no to you. And so I would talk to him and be like, hey, Peter, I kind of want to drive this. What do you think? And he might tell you like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Or like, yeah, I don't know, maybe, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's quite the right thing. I know people are complaining. He might be wishy-washy about it. If he's wishy-washy about it, then your question is like, okay, so I don't have full support from the person of authority. Why? Is it because the ROI is not quite right? Am I misaligned on the problem? Like you kind of go to that table and look a little bit like, am I not the right person? Do I not have the right idea? Like what's going on? Why are they wishy-washy versus being like, oh my God, absolutely, I wanted to do this forever and I just needed an owner, right? And then you can kind of figure out from there, if you really scratch and ask that why 5 times, why are you wishy-washy about this? Then you can learn, and then you can see if those are addressable or not. Is it not the right time, or is it not the right solution? And if it's not the right solution, then you can put a doc together. And it's like, okay, I think I can address this for you, right? Like, let me figure out what the solution is. What would make you comfortable with me driving the solution? And what are your real concerns? Is it cost? Is it something else? Is it like, what is it? And then can you resolve those? Can you ultimately arrive at something that makes the authority feel comfortable that those things, is the right problem to solve the right time, that it doesn't, it's pretty low downside risk. Maybe you could be like, hey, I want to try this and roll it back, right? That's really easy. If it's easy to roll back, then it's easy to try. And so there's a lot of things in there that are hard to capture until you talk to that person and see like, what do they think ultimately, right? Like why are they wishy-washy? I think that's the thing that you have to be attuned to. Oh, this person is wishy-washy, why? And then dig into that before you even write documents or anything else.